Scipii. Scipii. As soon as Hannibal started his war in 218 BC, the Roman Republic sent out its two consuls for that year, Tiberius Sempronius Longus and Publius Cornelius Scipio, on punitive expeditions into Carthaginian-controlled territory. Longus was to invade Africa, while Scipio was to open up a new front in Iberia, where the Carthaginians kept all their reddit gold and karma. Tiberius went to Sicily and took over Malta, while Scipio set up his legions in a Greek-allied colony of Massalia, intending to either A. stop Hannibal from invading Italy through Transalpine Gaul, or B. if Hannibal played defensively, to follow his senatorial orders and take over Hispania. However, when Hannibal teleported behind him using the Alps, Scipio was called back to Italy to defend its northern frontier. Sitting in Massalia, surrounded by Jupiter forgive me for uttering this word, Greeks, Scipio would make a decision that would affect the entire course of the war, becoming the main factor for Rome's survival after Trasimene and Cannae, and therefore being the reason for its eventual victory. I'll get into why at the end of this video. Publius decided to go back to Italy alone, leaving his brother Gnaeus in charge of the two legions he had at Massalia, and sending him into Hispania. The main focus for today's video will be the Battle of Hibera. However, I am going to quickly go over what we missed on the Iberian front. Just like Scipio left his brother Gnaeus in charge of the Iberian front, so did Hannibal leave his own brother, Hasdrubal. When Gnaeus arrived with his fleet in northern Iberia, he immediately started playing the liberator, promising the brave and stunning indigenous Spanish folks that Rome would give them back their reddit gold that the Carthaginians were stealing from them. In this way, he grew his army from about 20,000 to 25,000 and acquired the loyalty of some cities, towns, and villages, effectively turning Iberia northwest of the river Ebro fully pro-Roman. While this was happening, Hasdrubal was busy chasing Latina rebels in southern Spain, so he had left only half his army to guard the Ebro. The detachment was led by a random Punic literally who named Mago and a local Spanish chieftain called Indibilis. He will be important later on. Gnaeus quickly crushed this detachment at the Battle of Cissae and took both Mago and Indibilis as prisoners, but more importantly he captured the baggage train of valuables and reddit gold that belonged to the Carthaginian army now in Italy under Hannibal. This money would finance the Roman expedition until further payments arrived. Hasdrubal, being already outnumbered, could not really do much, but he did use his superiority in cavalry to hunt down the Roman sailors who were lollygagging around the shore. Then he retreated back across the Ebro. Winter was approaching, so Gnaeus too would scale back his blitzkrieg and establish the main Roman HQ for the Iberian front at Tarraco. Hasdrubal would pay some tribes to rebel over the winter, but nothing would come of it, except dead Iberians. These would be the events for the year 218 in Iberia. In 217, Hasdrubal recruited more men from allied Iberian tribes, and, capitalizing on the naval superiority he had just gotten with his previous raid on the Roman sailors, built 10 more warships, bringing his total up to 40, against Gnaeus's 25, which naturally were also undermanned. As soon as the weather turned warm, Carthaginians started marching north to confront Scipio, who was now both outnumbered and outshipped, which is a word I just made up and you'll have to deal with it. Gnaeus heard of the approach and had to make a choice. He either faced Hasdrubal on land, where they would be somewhat equal, or he faced them at sea, where Carthaginians were more numerous. To grind XP, he chose the latter. Okay, to be fair here, Carthaginians probably did not expect to be countered at sea, and they especially did not expect to be countered by an equal force. See, Scipio had a devilish little idea. Since he now lacked sailors and marines, why not just put soldiers on boats? No one would expect that development, would they? He even doubled down, and instead of just filling the ranks of the marines with legionaries, he put more men on the boats than there would be under normal circumstances. Then he sent 2 Massalian ships to scout out what was happening at the Carthaginian camp. Now Neptune, forgive me for saying this, but the Greek, scouts informed Gnaeus that now it was Hasdrubal's sailors who were lollygagging, and were docked on the river instead of being out in the open sea. Seeing the opportunity to nullify the numerical superiority of Hasdrubal's navy by fighting them in a choke point, Gnaeus swiftly sent his ships forward. Hasdrubal's Numidian scouts saw this and went back to inform the main army of what was happening. The problem with this, however, was that the scouting groups ran back independently, arriving at the camp at different intervals, planting growing panic in the ranks of Hasdrubal's navy, who were, as I mentioned, busy lollygagging and weren't ready for a fight anyway. Panicked and put in a situation that the current SOY Tenics would dub as Marge, they started running around aimlessly. Sailors started bumping into the Marines, and the Marines started getting onto the ships before they were ready. Quite the silly situation if I do say so myself, and I do, by the way. The Carthaginian navy did manage to set up for battle in the end, but they could not make it out to sea, instead having to do battle at the mouth of the river, where, as Gnaeus planned, they were stuck in a choke point. During the battle, they were further surprised by the amount of men on Roman ships, and quickly started panicking again. During this initial phase of the battle, Romans captured 2 ships and sank 4. The Punic melty was so strong that they turned back, sailed to the shore, abandoned the ships, and hid behind the infantry that was just watching the battle from their cuck chairs on land. Upon seeing this, Gnaeus, who was an impish little devil, sailed to the Carthaginian side, snatched their now empty ships, and went home, stealing 25 vessels. So out of the 40 ships, Hasdrubal lost 31, giving Scipio full naval supremacy, which he promptly used to sack the Iberian coast, including Carthago Nova, or Carthaginian if you are a disgusting Punic demon. The news of this victory could not have arrived sooner at Rome. The Senate was busy seething at Fabius for allowing Hannibal to roam freely around the Italian countryside. Remember, this is still 217, and they don't yet know that Fabius is the only smart one among them. Grasping at the only tangible, and at this point of the war, very rare W, the Senate gave Publius Scipio a fleet of 30 ships and 8,000 men, and sent him to reinforce and resupply his brother in Iberia. While Publius was on his way, Hasdrubal ransomed Indibilis from Gnaeus, and immediately set him up as a guerrilla commander. However, he forgot that Indibilis was a Hispanitard, and therefore was gifted with the same level of incompetence that is so common in them. Just some velites and skirmishers managed to clear out the supposed partisan force, sending Indibilis back to whatever gross tribe he came from. Don't worry, he'll be back though. After this little annoyance, Gnaeus said, "I can do that too, but better," and paid some other Hispanitards on the Punic hell side of the Ebro to revolt, using the money he plundered from the Carthaginian camp after last year's battle. But you know, obviously they were Spaniards, so there was not much success, but it did distract Hasdrubal long enough for Publius to arrive with extra forces. The Scipii brothers at once crossed the Ebro and besieged the city of Saguntum, the town over which, ostensibly, the whole war started. Hasdrubal was away in Lusitania, also known as Proto-Brazil. He was fighting the aforementioned rebels that Gnaeus bought, so Saguntum was mostly undefended, except a small garrison under a small, gullible, and maybe even honest Punic commander named Bostar, a Carthaginian that not only was not a devious demon, but also didn't expect others to be that way. I don't know, can you even believe that? Saguntum served as a big prison for Carthaginians. They held all the sons of the main tribal chiefs as hostage there, obviously to keep them from rebelling. Now get ready, it is time for another impish Olgol creature. There was a Hispanitard noble in the city, Abelix, who was very loud in his proclamations of supporting the Carthaginians over the past 3 years. But after seeing the Roman legions outside of Saguntum, he, as Polybius so aptly puts it, had formed a scheme in his mind worthy of a Spaniard and therefore a barbarian. As a side note here, Polybius and Livius are the main sources for the Second Punic War, and it's kinda hilarious how much both of them hate the Iberians. Even Carthaginians, and frankly their disgusting culture, don't catch as many bullets as the Spanish do. I mean, this guy was about to switch over to the Romans, and he still got roasted for being a traitor. Anyway, Abelix, seeing that the fortunes were turning, decided that it was time to glaze the Romans now. But he alone could not offer them anything of value, because remember, he was just a Hispanitard. So he concocted a plan that would make his existence worthwhile to the Scipii brothers. He went to the aforementioned only honest Carthaginian in existence, Bostar, and started putting his Spanish demon spells on him. "Hello sir, it seems like you are losing the war. You know what would help? If you release the hostages, then all of Iberia would love you. Your Izzat would go through the roof, sir." Bostar fell for this scam and arranged a transport for the prisoners. After this, Abelix once again scam-maxed and heroically offered to lead the transport so as to not put any high-ranking Carthaginian in a danger of a Roman ambush. Sir, Bostar fell for it again, to the surprise of no one. By the way, I'd just like to, as a side note, point out here that Bostar is the only guy, I think, in the entire Carthaginian history that is not named some variation of Hasdrubal, Hanno, Mago, or something like that. Or Hamilcar even. So maybe he really was a human being and not a demon. Who knows? Abelix went over to the Scipios and displayed his magnificent Izzat by promising to bring the prisoners over to them the next morning. The brothers agreed, and as promised, were delivered the hostages from all main Iberian tribes the next morning. They were all released back home, and the Scipii family was now known as liberators in all of Hispania. Then winter came and brought an end to the year 217. Now let us venture into the year 216 BC, where an exorbitant amount of nothing ever happened. At least in Spain, that is. Because of the release of the Iberian hostages by Abelix, all of Spain was free to revolt against Carthaginians, and so they did. Especially a tribe called the Third Etani. Hasdrubal would spend the entire year fighting the Thirds off, which coincidentally is what I'm doing right now. Crucially, the Scipios would not take advantage of this, as their main directive was to be a thorn in the Carthaginian side. So invading deep into Punic Hell would be an unnecessary risk. This is foreshadowing, by the way. As I mentioned in a previous video, it was in 216 that Hannibal's other brother, Mago, arrived in Carthage, asking for more troops in Italy. However, if you remember, he was cockblocked by Hanno II, who valued the Reddit gold mines in Iberia more than he valued winning the war. However, you'll probably also remember that Hanno did not have enough Senate karma to convince the assembly to fully reject Mago's proposal. So two armies were raised. One under Mago would sail to Italy to reinforce Hannibal with 20,000 men, 6,000 horsemen, and 40 elephants. And one army under Hasdrubal the Bold, also known as Hasdrubal no Baldi or Hasdrubal no Fono if you are so inclined. This army was mustered to help a rebellion against Rome in Sardinia, which we'll talk about in the next episode. It numbered around 12,000 infantry and 2,000 horsemen. I know, I was there. To further help Hannibal in Italy, Hasdrubal, the brother this time, not the Bold, was ordered to march to Italy and reinforce his sibling. However, here, Hasdrubal would fuck over his older brother extremely hard. He sent a report to the Senate detailing how fucked the situation was in Iberia and how even if everything went well, his successor would not have an easy time. Hanno II, the moderator of our peace board of the Carthaginian Senate, jumped at this opportunity and made sure that another army would be raised for Iberia to protect his Reddit gold mines. The recruitment effort would slow down the gathering of forces for Hannibal's other brother, Mago, immensely, leaving the MVP without reinforcements for a few more months. Himilco, the smug Chad Chungus pro-Barcid senator from 2 episodes ago, would be put in charge of this force. As soon as Himilco arrived in Spain, Hasdrubal took off with his army of about 25,000 men and headed north. The Scipios, being little devils again, thought to lure him into a battle on a favorable ground by forcing him to defend a Carthaginian allied town of Hibera. However, Hasdrubal did have that barcid dog in him, so he was quite good at putting his opponents into a reactionary position, rather than being in one himself. Instead of going to save Hibera, he besieged a Roman allied town, probably Amposta, successfully forcing the Scipio brothers to abandon the siege at Hibera and head south. Publius leading the navy, and Gnaeus the army. A combined arms operation. However, what Publius would actually do during the upcoming battle is unclear. Maybe it was supposed to be a nod at the great Fabius Maximus. If one brother was fighting and the other one was doing nothing, the dictator would be pretty happy. If a little bit confused, maybe. The two armies lined up in battle formations. Romans in their traditional maniples and the Carthaginians in their traditional rage bait formation, with weak Iberians in the center and the Libyans on their sides, and of course Numidians on their flanks. It is probably clear for everyone that Hasdrubal was going for Cannae 2.0 by putting the charge bait in the center, but Gnaeus was no Varro, and Hasdrubal was no Hannibal. The Roman army advanced. The skirmishers on both sides started hurling and slinging their weapons at the enemy. The Roman war machine slowly rolled up to the Carthaginian line. The Hastati threw their pila and charged the Iberian golems. Meanwhile, on the flanks, Hasdrubal started the cavalry battle. The Roman cavalry fled on impact. In the center, as planned, the Iberians started to fall back, and the Romans were now flanked from three sides. All that was left to repeat Cannae and achieve full encirclement was the Carthaginian cavalry. Which, by the way, never came, if anyone cares. This is the speculation part of the video, so bear with me here for a little bit. My reading of this battle is that Gnaeus was one of the only few Roman commanders who knew how to use the legion's cavalry detachments. The Roman equites were outclassed by almost all cavalry forces in the world. They were fine at scouting, skirmishing, and repelling light infantry, but when it comes down to direct engagements with other horsemen, they were simply not good. Which is fine, because that was not their job. However, for some reason, Roman commanders kept insisting to use equites as direct anti-cavalry forces. That being said, though, Roman equites had a quality to them that I doubt other cavalries of that era possessed. Here's what I mean. A normal legion would have 300 equites with them, 150 on each wing, or ala, peace be upon him. These 300 men were made up of 10 turmae, of 30 men, which in turn broke down into 3 decurias of 10 men each. So basically the Roman cavalry wing was a Lego set. This decentralization, I think, was the key advantage of the Roman cavalry, and I think Gnaeus used that perfectly here. See, instead of disintegrating upon impact, as I have just so masterfully lied to you, the Roman flanks, I think, simply ran away in an organized fashion, forcing the Numidians to chase them and thus abandon the field. And that's why the Carthaginian horsemen never came back to finish the encirclement. But again, this is just my take, and I know this is a shitpost channel, but sometimes I cannot stop myself. But just as a little counter-argument to what I'm saying, we, for example, do not know how the Carthaginian cavalry wing was set up. Maybe they were also decentralized, thus making the Roman decentralization not so unique. We just don't know. So I'm just talking out of my asshole here, but of course I'm correct. Why wouldn't I be? Back to the battle. In the center, Romans knew that if they ever wanted to see their homes again, they had to win here. While the Iberian golems fighting against them were very much aware that if they won, they would have to march to Italy and possibly spend years there, if not die there. Hasdrubal tried to rally the Hispaniotards, but this dude was not Hannibal, bro. He simply did not know as many spells to control the golem as his brother did. So the Spanish, customary to their barbarian nature, turned their backs and ran. Now it was the Libyans who got encircled and slaughtered, and eventually so did the Carthaginian cavalry. Only Hasdrubal and the Spanish made it out of the battle alive. He wanted a Cannae 2.0, but he got Cannae times -1 or something. I don't know math. I mean, just reverse Cannae, whatever. The Carthaginian camp was sacked, and Hasdrubal now was left both without an army and without money. The moderator of the R-Peace subreddit in the Carthaginian Senate, Hanno II, pounced at this news, finally convincing the senators that Iberia was more important than Italy, and forcing the other Barcid brother, Mago, to take the army that he raised over the last 6 months for Hannibal to Spain. So now to wrap this up, with just one decision to not give up on the Iberian front in 218 BC, Publius Scipio had now just indirectly denied Hannibal 2 reinforcing armies, destroying one at Hibera himself, or I guess it was his brother, he was doing nothing, and forcing the other to sail for Iberia instead of Italy. If Hannibal had gotten any of these 2 armies, let alone both, there's a very good chance that I'd be making this video in honor of the great Carthaginian Trade Empire, and we'd all be living in Punic hell. But thankfully, I'll dare and say that due to these 2 Latin beasts, Rome won. And the disgusting practice of child sacrifices to Moloch are a thing of the past. Right? Guys? We won, right? Guys? Hasdrubal tried... Hasdrubal tried... No, come on, why do I keep doing this? Hasdrubal tried... Dude, fuck off with this. What? Hasdrubal tried... There we go. Hasdrubal tried...